Muroc Dry Lake, California, September 1946. The air shimmers above the cracked earth. A P-38. Lightning sits on the lakebed, pilot Jeffrey de Havilland Jr. strapped into the cockpit. The son of Britain's greatest aircraft designer is about to test his father's newest creation, the DH-108 Swallow, an experimental jet designed to explore transonic flight. The aircraft accelerates. At 6,000 feet, approaching Mach 0.9, the control surfaces reverse their function. The elevator becomes useless, the aircraft pitches violently, structural loads exceed design limits, and the DH-108 disintegrates. De Havilland dies instantly. 3 weeks later, a P-80 shooting star diving at high speed encounters compressibility. The shockwave forms ahead of the wing. Control authority vanishes. The pilot fights a machine that no longer obeys input. He barely recovers, reporting afterward that the aircraft felt like it hit an invisible wall. The phenomenon has killed dozens of pilots. As aircraft approach, the speed of sound, airflow over the wings accelerates past Mach 1 locally, even while the aircraft itself remains subsonic. Shock waves form, pressure distribution across control surfaces changes unpredictably. Some controls reverse their effect, others stop working entirely. The aircraft enters a regime where conventional aerodynamics no longer apply. The military establishment calls it the sound barrier. Engineers debate whether it represents a genuine physical limit or merely a transition zone not yet understood. Wind tunnel tests provide conflicting data. Scale models behave differently than full-size aircraft. Some aerodynamicists argue that the mathematics predict infinite drag at Mach 1, making supersonic flight thermodynamically impossible. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, examines the evidence. Their conclusion is measured, but grim. Current aircraft cannot survive transonic conditions. The structural and aerodynamic challenges may be insurmountable with existing technology. They recommend a research program to gather data, cautioning that manned flight beyond Mach 0.9 constitutes reckless endangerment. But the Army Air Forces has already commissioned an aircraft specifically designed to penetrate the sound barrier, built by Bell Aircraft, powered by a rocket engine, shaped like a bullet with wings. Project MX-653, the X-1. This is how America decided to fly faster than sound, despite every expert predicting catastrophic failure. Bell Aircraft Corporation, Buffalo, New York, 1944. Engineer Robert Woods studies ballistics data from 50 caliber bullets. The shape is proven. Bullets fly supersonic routinely, maintaining stability through the transonic regime without disintegrating. The military wants an aircraft that can do the same. Woods decides to build an airplane shaped exactly like a bullet. The XS-1, later redesignated X-1, emerges from this philosophy. The fuselage is a cylinder with a pointed nose tapering to a sharp tail. The wings are straight, thin, and mounted high on the fuselage to avoid interference from shock waves. The entire aircraft measures 31 feet long with a 28-foot wingspan. It looks like a child's toy, absurdly small compared to operational fighters. But the propulsion system is revolutionary. Bell abandons conventional jet engines entirely. Jets produce thrust continuously but lack the power-to-weight ratio needed for supersonic acceleration. Instead, the X-1 carries a reaction motors, XLR-11 rocket engine, 4 combustion chambers producing 6,000 pounds of thrust. The fuel is liquid oxygen and diluted ethyl alcohol. The burn time is 2.5 minutes. After that, the X-1 becomes a glider. The fuel tanks consume most of the fuselage volume. Liquid oxygen requires cryogenic storage at minus 297 degrees Fahrenheit. The tank structure must withstand thermal stress and vibration while preventing leaks that could turn the aircraft into a flying bomb. The alcohol tank sits directly behind the cockpit, separated by a thin bulkhead. A leak or rupture would immolate the pilot before he could react. The cockpit itself is primitive. No ejection seat. The canopy is bolted shut from outside. If something goes wrong during powered flight, the pilot has no escape option. He rides the aircraft down. The instrumentation is basic: airspeed indicator, altimeter, Mach meter, and engine monitoring gauges. The control stick is conventional, connected to control surfaces by cables and push rods. Bell builds 3X1 aircraft. The first, designated 46062, is designed for envelope expansion. The second and third are backups. The entire program operates under strict secrecy. The existence of the X1 remains classified. The engineering team knows they are building an aircraft that may kill its pilot. They build it anyway because the question demands an answer. Muroc Army Airfield, December 1945. A B-29 Superfortress taxis toward the runway, modified to carry the X-1 suspended in its bomb bay. The concept is heretical. Operational aircraft take off under their own power. The X-1 cannot. Its fuel load provides only 150 seconds of thrust. Wasting that burn time climbing from ground level would leave no margin for high-speed testing. The solution is air launch. The B-29's bomb bay has been reconfigured with mounting brackets and release mechanisms. The X-1 hangs beneath the mothership like an external fuel tank. At altitude, the bomber pilot opens the bay doors. The X-1 pilot climbs down a ladder from the B-29's fuselage into the rocket plane's cockpit, while both aircraft fly at 5,000 feet. Once secured inside, he signals ready. The B-29 climbs to 25,000 feet, levels off, and releases the X-1 into free flight. The procedure is dangerous in ways conventional takeoffs are not. The pilot enters the X-1 through a hatch that must be sealed from outside by the B-29's crew. If the X-1 drops prematurely, the pilot is trapped in an unpowered glider with no way to open the cockpit. If the fuel begins leaking during flight to altitude, the X-1 becomes a bomb hanging beneath the B-29 with no way to jettison safely. But the air launch provides critical advantages. The X-1 begins each flight at 25,000 feet with full fuel and oxidizer. Every second of rocket burn goes toward acceleration and climb rather than altitude gain. The drop method extends the effective test envelope by minutes, allowing multiple high-speed runs per flight rather than a single maximum effort dash. The B-29 crew trains for months. The release sequence requires precise timing and coordination. Too early, and the X-1 drops into turbulent air. Too late, and the test window narrows. The bomber must maintain exactly straight and level flight during separation. Any deviation induces oscillation in the X-1, potentially causing structural failure before the rocket ignites. The first drop test happens without ignition. The X-1 pilot glides down from 25,000 feet, learning how the aircraft handles unpowered. The controls are responsive. The glide ratio is poor, but manageable. The landing on Muroc's dry lake bed is uneventful. The X-1 survives its first flight. The real testing can begin. Bell test pilot Jack Willems makes the first powered flight on December 9, 1946. The X-1 drops from the B-29, falls for 2 seconds, then the rocket ignites. 4 chambers firing, 6,000 pounds of thrust pushing a 12,000-pound aircraft. The acceleration is violent. Willems reports feeling compressed into his seat as the X-1 climbs at 3,000 feet per minute. At 35,000 feet, he shuts down the engine and glides home. Maximum speed, Mach 0.79. The incremental testing begins. Each flight pushes slightly faster. Mach 0.8, Mach 0.82, Mach 0.85. The X-1 handles predictably through the low transonic range. Control response remains linear. No shock waves form. The aircraft behaves like a conventional fighter with exceptional acceleration. The engineers grow cautiously optimistic. Then Mach 0.88. The buffeting starts. Vibrations transmitted through the airframe. The X-1 shakes hard enough that instruments blur. Willems reports difficulty reading the Mach meter. The controls feel heavy, requiring increased stick force for the same response. The elevator effectiveness decreases. At Mach 0.90, the buffeting intensifies. The aircraft becomes difficult to control precisely. NACA engineers analyze the data. The buffeting indicates shock wave formation over the wing. The local airflow has exceeded Mach 1 even though the aircraft remains subsonic. The compressibility effects are beginning. The question is whether they will stabilize or worsen as speed increases. Wind tunnel data predicts catastrophic control reversal. Flight test data suggests manageable degradation. Nobody knows which prediction is correct. Willems pushes to Mach 0.92 before tragedy intervenes. On August 6, 1947, he dies in a crash unrelated to the X-1 program. His replacement arrives from Wright Field, Captain Charles Yeager, Army Air Force's test pilot, 24 years old, combat veteran with 11 confirmed kills in World War II, reputation for fearlessness bordering on recklessness. He has never flown a rocket aircraft. He has 3 months to learn before the program's deadline. The Army wants supersonic flight before 1948. The Navy is developing its own rocket plane, the Douglas Skyrocket. The competition is explicit. Whichever service breaks the sound barrier first claims the achievement. Yeager has 100 days to do what experts consider impossible. Muroc, August 1947. Chuck Yeager sits in the X-1 cockpit while it hangs in the B-29's bomb bay. This is his third glide flight, learning how the aircraft handles without power. The X-1 drops. Yeager trims for level flight. The controls respond crisply. He noses down, building speed. At Mach 085, the buffeting begins. The aircraft shakes like a jackhammer. His vision blurs. The instruments become unreadable. The X-1 is teaching him its personality. Unlike conventional aircraft, it gives no warning before reaching transonic conditions. The transition from smooth flight to violent buffeting happens in seconds. The elevator effectiveness changes with Mach number. At low speed, tiny inputs produce large responses. At high speed, full deflection barely moves the aircraft. The pilot must constantly recalibrate his touch. Yeager makes his first powered flight September 4th. 4 chambers, full thrust. The acceleration is obscene. He climbs to 45,000 feet in 90 seconds. At Mach 0.85, he shuts down and glides home. The powered handling matches the unpowered characteristics. The X-1 is consistent. That consistency builds confidence. If the aircraft behaves predictably up to Mach 0.92, perhaps it will remain predictable beyond. The flight program accelerates. 3 flights per week. Each pushes the Mach number higher. Mach 0.90, Mach 0.92, Mach 0.94. The buffeting intensifies but remains manageable. The elevator loses effectiveness but does not reverse. The X-1 is proving more controllable than the aerodynamicists predicted. The sound barrier is not a wall. It is a zone of turbulence that can be flown through. At Mach 0.94, Yeager encounters the first genuinely dangerous phenomenon. The nose pitches down violently. The elevator does not respond. The X-1 enters an uncommanded dive, accelerating past Mach 0.96 before Yeager regains control using the horizontal stabilizer trim. The engineers recognize the problem immediately. Shock waves forming over the elevator are blanking its effectiveness. At higher Mach numbers, the conventional elevator becomes useless. Bell installs a flying tail, a movable horizontal stabilizer that can be adjusted electrically in flight. The modification allows pitch control even when shock waves disable the elevator. The solution is elegant and unprecedented. No aircraft has ever needed backup pitch control. The X-1 requires it because it is entering flight conditions where conventional aerodynamics fail. Muroc, October 12, 1947. Chuck Yeager is riding horses in the desert when the animal bolts. He falls, striking his right side against a fence rail. The pain is immediate and intense. By morning, he can barely move his right arm. He visits a civilian doctor in Rosamond who confirms 2 cracked ribs. Yeager does not report the injury. A medical grounding now means missing the supersonic attempt scheduled for October 14th. The morning of the 14th, Yeager arrives at the flight line, unable to raise his right arm high enough to seal the X-1's cockpit door. The door locks require pulling a handle with significant force. Yeager cannot generate that force without excruciating pain. He mentions the problem to his flight engineer, Jack Ridley, who disappears for 10 minutes and returns with a section of broomstick. The makeshift lever provides mechanical advantage, allowing Yeager to lock the door using his left hand. The B-29 climbs to 20,000 feet. Yeager descends into the X-1. The broomstick works perfectly. The door seals. At 25,000 feet, the B-29 levels off. Yeager signals ready. The bomber releases the X-1. 2 seconds of free fall, then ignition. 4 chambers firing. The X-1 accelerates and climbs simultaneously. Yeager reaches Mach 0.8 at 40,000 feet. The buffeting is severe. The entire airframe vibrates. Then, at Mach 0.96, the buffeting stops. The ride becomes smooth. The shock waves have moved aft of the wing. The X-1 is flying in undisturbed supersonic flow. Yeager advances the throttle. 2 more chambers, full power. The Mach meter ticks upward, 0.98, 0.99. Then the needle jumps, Mach 1.02. The X-1 is supersonic. The flight is smooth and controlled. The aircraft responds normally. No catastrophic loads, no control reversal, no structural failure. Chuck Yeager becomes the first human to fly faster than sound. The flight lasts 14 seconds past Mach 1. Then Yeager shuts down, glides back to Muroc, and lands without incident. The achievement remains classified for 8 months. The military continues testing, pushing the X-1 to higher Mach numbers to gather data. On March 26, 1948, the Air Force announces the accomplishment publicly. The sound barrier is broken. The experts were wrong. Edwards Air Force Base, June 1948. The residents of nearby towns begin reporting explosions. Windows rattle. Dishes fall from shelves. The concussions arrive without warning, sometimes multiple times per day. Local officials suspect military ordnance testing. The Air Force denies dropping bombs. The mystery persists for weeks until someone connects the timing to X-1 flights. The sonic boom is a phenomenon nobody predicted. When an aircraft exceeds Mach 1, it compresses the air ahead of it into a shock wave cone. That cone expands outward from the aircraft, traveling at the speed of sound toward the ground. When it reaches the surface, listeners experience it as a sharp pressure pulse. 2 distinct booms, one from the nose shock wave, one from the tail. The intensity depends on altitude, speed, and atmospheric conditions. The X-1 flying at 50,000 feet creates boom overpressure measuring 1.5 pounds per square foot at ground level, strong enough to crack plaster and break windows. The boom carpet, the area on the ground affected by the shock wave, stretches for miles along the aircraft's flight path. Every supersonic flight generates a boom heard across the desert. There is no way to eliminate it without slowing below Mach 1. The phenomenon creates immediate political problems. Supersonic flight over populated areas becomes unacceptable. The sonic boom makes high-speed flight incompatible with civilian tolerance. Future supersonic aircraft will require restricted operating areas or flight corridors over water. The X-1 data defines the problem that will plague supersonic transport development for decades. But the boom also proves supersonic flight is sustainable. The shock waves do not tear the aircraft apart. The structural loads remain within design limits. The X-1 routinely flies supersonic without damage, demonstrating that the catastrophic predictions were wrong. The aircraft can withstand the environment. The engineering challenge is not surviving supersonic flight, but managing its side effects. Researchers begin studying boom minimization. Aircraft shape affects shockwave intensity. Blunt noses produce stronger booms than sharp profiles. The X-1's bullet shape minimizes boom strength for its size. Future designs will incorporate shaping rules derived from X-1 data, attempting to reduce the boom signature through aerodynamic optimization. Edwards Air Force Base, 1951. The X-1 program concludes. The aircraft have proven their point. Supersonic flight is possible, sustainable, and scientifically valuable. The barriers that experts predicted were artifacts of incomplete understanding, not fundamental physics. The X-1 demonstrated that human engineering could solve problems that theory suggested were insurmountable. The immediate impact is operational aircraft. North American develops the F-100 Super Sabre, the first production fighter capable of supersonic level flight. The design incorporates lessons learned from the X-1, swept wings for transonic efficiency, area ruling to minimize drag rise, flying tail for pitch control at high Mach numbers. The Super Sabre enters service in 1954, 7 years after Yeager's breakthrough flight. Commercial aviation follows more slowly. The sonic boom problem prevents supersonic passenger service over land. But the Concorde and Tu-144 emerge in the 1960s, proving that supersonic transport is technically feasible even if economically marginal. The X-1 made these aircraft conceivable by demonstrating that humans could design for speeds beyond sound. The sound barrier was never a wall, it was a threshold. The X-1 crossed it because engineers built an aircraft specifically designed for conditions nobody fully understood, because a test pilot flew it despite broken ribs and classified risks, because the question demanded an answer and turning back was Unacceptable. This is how the plane no one thought could fly broke speed records and redefined what aircraft could accomplish. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My friend, who is a commercial pilot, said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories about airlines and the realities of modern travel like this deserve to be told. Help me show her that these videos matter. Please subscribe to the channel and let's keep these stories from being buried.